So, I believe it was 2006 that Mr. Dawkins published his book, The God Delusion. I have never paid too much attention to his writings, simply because I thought the hype would die a fast and silent death. You see, his book isn't what you would call a very sophisticated philosophical book. It is smoothly written, but it lacks a lot, philosophical speaking. Anyway, I was wrong about the dying stuff. Many still love his audacious mantra, with which Dawkins actually starts his second chapter.
The God of the Old Testament is arguably the most unpleasant character in all fiction. Jealous and proud of it, a petty, unjust, unforgiving control freak, a vindictive, bloodthirsty ethnic cleanser, a misogynistic, homophobic, racist, infanticidal, genocidal, filicidal, pestilential, megalomaniacal, sadomasochistic, capriciously malevolent bully.
I have always wondered what one could answer this foolish but immensely popular statement given by Mr. Dawkins in his equally foolish book, The God Delusion. Skeptics, atheists and many unbelievers love this kind of rhetoric. It sounds so challenging, it sounds so bold, it sounds so tough. But in reality it gives away a total misunderstanding of the biblical God. Mr. Dawkins might know a thing or two about biology, but theologically speaking, he fails big time. So let's discuss a few of these titles he so boastfully assigned to the God of the Bible. Let's see what we can say about it without going into endless debates. Good, and that was my introduction in the first video, so I just copy-paste that bit. I was not really surprised, but I was amazed about all the comments that were given on the first part, so I'm really wondering what will happen with this second part. So, let's discuss a few of the following titles Mr. Dawkins assigned to the God of the Bible. Just let's see what we can say about the other things. So let's start with the first title, which is Vindictive. Let me read Deuteronomy for you before we continue. To me belongeth vengeance and recompense. Their foot shall slide in due time, for the day of the calamity is at hand, and the things that shall come upon them make haste. And this is quoted by the Apostle Paul as well in Romans 12. Dearly beloved, avenge not yourselves, but rather give place unto wrath, for it is written, Vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord. God is one who has the authority to carry out vengeance. These could tie into a couple of New Testament parables. For example, the master punishing the slave who couldn't forgive his fellow slave, and the field owner who killed the tenants who killed his son. These are images that portray God bringing vengeance for others. There you go. God is vindictive, right? No, hold on a minute. Let's see what the dictionary has to say about this word. Vindictiveness. Showing a strong and unreasonable desire to harm or upset somebody because you think that they have harmed you. And what does the dictionary says about vengeance? The act of punishing or harming somebody in return for what they have done to you, your family or friends. So actually these are two quite different things, and that is typically what people like to do. They use a word which comes close to the original meaning, but which is not quite the same. Then they continue to debate about that word they themselves just started to use. And that's what we typically call the straw man fallacy. God is by no means vindictive. However, there are examples in the Bible of him talking about vengeance on people who, for example, said that they would do or were doing some good stuff, but in reality they were doing quite the opposite. Anyway, vindictive is just not a word which we can assign to God. And I've spent too much time already on this word, so let's go to the next one. Bloodthirsty ethnic cleanser. Let's start with Deuteronomy again. Deuteronomy 7 verse 1 and 2, and I will cut it up in little pieces because else it will be a little bit too long. The Hittites and the Girgashites and the Amorites and the Canaanites and the Perizzites and the Hivites and the Jebusites. When the Lord thy God shall deliver them unto thee, or before thee, thou shalt smite them and utterly destroy them. Thou shalt make no covenant with them, nor shew mercy unto them. So I actually already touched on this in a different video, and there I argued that the ancient people used phrases like utterly destroyed to explain that they had achieved absolute victory. Also, I said these commands were restricted to specific locations. These locations were mostly military centers, so they were not your average city populated by innocent civilians. Nevertheless, I am not really dogmatic on that explanation I gave in the other video, because I also recognize that God really meant business. In other words, yes, I believe Israel mostly had to target military centers, but no, that doesn't mean that only military people were killed. But does this mean that God is a bloodthirsty ethnic cleanser? And my short answer is no. But I will explain. Two pieces of evidence are actually worth mentioning. Firstly, we see that there are exceptions to God's command to completely destroy. You see, for example, Rahab, the Canaanite prostitute, who is spared from the complete destruction of Jericho. Why? Because she puts her trust in the Lord. Then, just only one chapter later, Achan, if that's the way I pronounce it in English, in Dutch it's Achan, Achan, an Israelite, is put to death for taking some stuff from Jericho, something God had forbidden to do. Achan's entire household, and that includes the donkeys, were treated in the same way as God wanted the people in Jericho to be treated. God's cleansing of the promised land was not genocidal. God's persecution wasn't against race or one group in particular, but it was against sin. So you see what Dawkins is doing. He's using the strawman fallacy again. He's taking the killing passages and he just puts the word genocide somewhere in between. You see, the meaning of genocide is the murder of a large number of people from a particular nation or ethnic group, with the aim of destroying that nation or group. And Deuteronomy 9 explains that God's wrath wasn't aimed at a specific nation or ethnic group. Israel didn't get the promised land because they were such upright, holy people. It says, not for thy righteousness or for the uprightness of thine heart dost thou go to possess their land, but for the wickedness of these nations the Lord thy God doth drive them out before thee. So I'm not saying that the whole killing stuff doesn't disturb me. Actually, we all should be worried about these texts. However, we shouldn't doubt God's character, but we should realize that these episodes show us our own shortcomings towards the Creator. God punishes evil, and the Canaanites were extremely excellent in doing the wrong stuff. Let's move on. Misogynistic. A misogynist is a person who hates or dislikes women or believes that they are not as good as men. Well, you know what? Mr. Dawkins has a big vocabulary. I'll give him that. However, the way he's using these words are portraying a complete lack of understanding of God's character. And atheists usually come with all sorts of examples to demonstrate this female-hating stuff. For example, Eve was created after Adam. She was created to be his helper. Eve was made from Adam's rib, so obviously she is not as highly regarded. Men throughout history have treated women horrible, such as the story of Lot, who received angels in his house, and an angry mob demanded that Lot surrendered the angels to their lusts. Instead, Lot proposes his own daughters in place of the angels. And by the way, did you know that some churches tell women to be quiet, to have long hair and to wear dresses? You see, all these examples cannot really account for God's thinking, can they? I'm not going to discuss these individual points because I rather look at Jesus and talk about the things he did in public. As a Christian, I believe Jesus is the image of God. We can read this in Colossians 1 verse 15. And as such, Jesus puts forth the attitude God the Father has towards women. So, looking at Jesus, what do we see? Let me use a list I found on a website of a lady called Emily Elizabeth Anderson. Number 1, Jesus protected women. John 8, and for example, John 8 verse 2 to 11. Jesus empowered women. Matthew 28. Jesus honored women publicly. Luke 8 verse 43 to 48. He released the voices of women. John 12 verse 1 to 8. He confided in women. He trusted women. John 11 verse 20 to 45. Jesus actually was funded by women. Luke 8 verse 1 to 3. He celebrated women by name. Luke 10 41 to 42. Jesus learned from women. We can see that happening in Mark 7 verse 24 to 30, and obviously his mother there. And he respected women. Luke 8 verse 45 to 48 and Luke 13 verse 16. And then he also spoke of women as examples to follow. We can see this in John 12 verse 1 to 12. So let me be clear. If a man says he follows Christ but doesn't respect women, he's just an hypocrite. I can't say it any milder than that. We men are warned and ordered to respect women. We can read 1 Peter chapter 3 verse 7. Likewise, ye husbands, dwell with them according to knowledge, giving honor unto the wife, as unto the weaker vessel, and as being heirs together of the grace of life, that your prayers be not hindered. Ephesians 5:25. Husbands, love your wives, even as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for it. So to summarize, Jesus often addressed women directly while in public, and this was unusual for a man to do. The disciples were actually surprised to see Jesus talking with the Samaritan woman at the well in Sychar. The Lord spoke freely with the woman taken in adultery. We see Jesus talking publicly with the widow of Nain, the woman with the bleeding disorder, and a woman who called to him from a crowd. Likewise, Jesus talked to a woman who was twisted and bent over and could not straighten up for more than 18 years. Even in the most horrible time of his life, he spoke to a group of women while he was on his way to be crucified. So, I'll leave it at this. This was the second part of this quote. We'll tackle the next bit next time. And again, I have no intention to debate with atheists. Especially not atheists who love this book. I'm just not gonna debate you. Some like to see that as a sign of weakness on my part, and you know what? That's fine with me. Keep on thinking that, I don't mind. However, I hope, and I really hope, and it's my prayer, that people who are stuck in these foolish atheistic mantras will open their hearts and minds to the Word of God. For the Christians among you, the Christians who watch this video, I would like to challenge you to explore these topics even more. Maybe your colleague or your sportsmate or maybe a family member has heard these kinds of quotes about God's character and is wondering how much of it is true. Or maybe you yourself are a little overwhelmed by these words. You see, it is good to see what the possible answers can be, to learn how wonderful God actually is. Anyway, do let me know your thoughts in the comments of the video or article below. And remember, I'm mostly active on my Odyssey channel. You'll find a link to that channel in the description of this video. I very much appreciate your prayers and your support. Please take a look in the description of this video to find out how you can help me. Also, I'll place a link there to both the Dutch and English transcripts of this video. And finally, you'll find the links to the other videos I've made about this topic as well. And that's all in the same description. So God bless you, thank you for watching, and let's see how we approach the rest of Dawkins' quote in the next video. Thank you for watching this video. You can give me a thumbs up if you liked it. You can also subscribe to my channel, or even better, follow me on Odyssey. That way you will never miss a new video. You will find all the links in the description below.